Hello, Jamie. So
Hi,
I'm just,
Nina.
you're also somewhere cold. I
I,
needed to put on a jacket. It's like teasing everyone. I'm really warm. I'm so warm.
you know what? It's been really warm. Yes, I'm in Toronto, Canada. But today it feels like a beautiful fall day, and I'm so ready for it. But yes, it's a lot colder here than it is where you are.
Okay. But it's still beautiful, I'm sure. Like autumn in Canada is just something else. Um, Wonderful to have you on today, really, and perfect progression. You know, you're in the business of people, and not only are you in the business of people, you're in the business of people and creating value. And you know, there's nothing like human capital to create more value. So, interim CEO of StartUp Canada, the founder of the leadership agency. I think you're in multiple geographies. Love to hear it from you. Tell us a little bit about Jamie.
Oh yeah, you know what I love actually? I was listening to Tolo's introduction and his segment, and he was fantastic. And I thought to myself, how interesting is this that, we've got Tolo, who's a neuroscientist and is so academically, impressive and in his own, like in his practice. And then you've got me who's coming on who's a high school dropout. And, I think that that's important to share. And I think that, in the theme of transparency and learning from each other, I think that's, something that is unique, to be able to be open and honest and transparent about all the learnings, throughout the journey. And that is one of my, things that actually brought me to where I am today, because I went to school or later in life. I was, I think, 24 when I finally went to college, and I wrote an essay, and it was about marketing. And at the time, it was called guerrilla marketing. And now it's probably better known as like interceptive or even influencer marketing. And a founder of the company that I wrote the essay about read the essay and hired me. And that's how I started in recruitment today. And that's really what led me to this practice and to this profession, and really helped me identify my purpose in terms of work and working with startups and with founders. And here I am 20 years later and getting to help build the most impressive companies of our generation.
I think it's hard to be in a people's business. I mean, I think although I've always loved the whole energy of a team and the dynamic and the surprises you get, people just surprise you, and they really surprise you in wonderful ways. And when I walked away from the company I founded in September, and I moving back into finance, and I think just the thing that I'm most upset about is that room full of energy and people and just what they bring to the table. And I think when you're building and people are building together, it's just lovely. You know, when you're moving houses and everyone, comes and helps you, and you have that pizza, there's nothing like that energy. And if you can replicate it every day, I was just very lucky. For years and years, I had that energy on a daily basis. But when you're running a company or you're dealing with a lot of people, then you also have the other side of managing people's mental health, people's well-being. Just talk us through your experience with that, and what are the highs and the lows, and what are the things that you've seen in your journey?
Yeah, I think that a lot of entrepreneurs today and founders and people that I see in my community and in my peer group of entrepreneurs is that a lot of businesses and a lot of founders are basing the way that they start their businesses or run their businesses, with very conventional ways of doing so, right? And I think that we're in this era of change and evolution and purpose-driven decisions. And I think for us to effectively lead in today's world, requires us as leaders and founders to get really clear on who we are, as leaders and founders. And yeah, there's definitely parts of this founder and entrepreneurial journey that are really scary and are really isolating and can feel at times and oftentimes not inclusive, right? Like I really believe in that there's room for all of us to thrive. And when we start to get clear on who we are and how we can motivate and lead ourselves, that then helps us, lead effectively, with the people who either work for us or around us. And I think, part of that journey in leading people is there's going to be mistakes made. There are going to be learning opportunities throughout it. And I think that you can't wait to have all the answers on how to do everything right. And that's the same when it comes to people, because we're all human and we're all unique. And I think when you're aligned, to your values and to your purpose, things get a little bit more clear, right? Things get a little bit more definitive in terms of what you expect of people, how you want to show up and how you expect people to show up for your business, or for an assignment or for your clients or whatever it is. But really the nucleus and the underpinning of how to lead people effectively, and what I've learned is getting really clear on your purpose and how you lead yourself and how you expect yourself to show up. And I think that creating safe places, within your environment, within your business, within your leadership team, I think is a really important step, to be vulnerable yourself and to allow others to be vulnerable and to really learn from others. I think listening is really key as well.
It's really interesting. I've met some amazingly capable people, and they kind of hold themselves back. And unfortunately, like being Middle Eastern, you ask people lots of personal questions, which I never did in the UK. Just when I moved back, something in my head clicked, and I'm like, how many kids do you have? And where do your parents live? And it becomes like a more of a personal relationship. And I really found that a lot of people's why people hold themselves back is to do with their history, is to do with their probably family setup. There's so much to unpack there. And sometimes some of the most talented people don't realize their potential, and you can push them and you can try, but how do you get people? I know you're a big advocate of therapy and coaching, and you're open about it. You're wonderfully open. But how do you help people just realize that value or understand that value and just gobble it all up?
Well, I think that I'll tell you a story. So I do believe that there's this idea and this perception that when you're a leader, you're meant to know all the answers. You're meant to, and whether that's an expectation that people are putting on you, or you're perceiving it that way, or you're putting it on yourself, most likely, right? Is that, to know all the answers, that means you have to be one step ahead of everyone. You have to know a little bit more than everyone else. You have to do this. And it's this rising pressure that can become too much, and more often than we realize. And I think that if we look at, say, when you're a trapeze artist, right, you aren't going to get up onto the wire and just walk that wire without any training, without any understanding of your surroundings, but most importantly, you're not going to get up on that wire unless there's a net to catch you. That's just not reasonable. And I think that the message here is that you can't go it alone. That it's just unreasonable. Maybe you can in certain situations, or maybe when you first get started, or maybe when you're making really tough decisions, it's better to make them on your own. And there's going to be situations where that does help and that does propel growth and change and evolution. But I think overall, the overarching message there is that the net is your people. That's who's going to be there to catch you and to see your blind spots. And I think if we're going to be expecting people there to be our net and to help us and to support us, then you have to show up for them, right? And you have to be transparent, and you have to be vulnerable. I'll give you another example and share another story is, just as much like Lubna, I lost my very best friend in 2022 to breast cancer. And for 2, maybe even 3 years, I think I've just finally, in the last maybe 6 months to a year, stopped saying, oh, I'm fine. I got really good at lying to myself and to other people around me, saying, oh, I'm fine, everything's fine. And I think once I let that expectation of myself go around, I'm okay, everything's fine, because if I'm not okay, then my business is not okay. And the people who, report to me, or the people who are on my payroll, or then if I'm not fine, then no one else is fine. And so I have to really, live up to that at all times. And so once I stopped lying to myself and lying to others, saying, I'm not fine, I need help, I can't go with this alone. I was, really, touched and moved by how once I started doing work on myself and being transparent about that, I was able to give back. And I realized, all that time that I spent lying to myself and to others, I wasn't giving back. I had nothing to give. And so I think it's, how we feel inside and the work that we do on ourselves is what is the beacon of what we attract. And so I think that the work that we do on ourselves comes from being able to be transparent and to give back to those so they can be your net, because you can't go it alone.
Yeah, we can't. We definitely, and we don't want to, even if we could, it's boring. We want to all go all together. I think one of the things that's really big is just knowing where you're going, knowing your purpose, like really having your eye on that kind of the outcome, because that just gives you comfort. And we heard Dr. Gabor yesterday talk about how certainty really gives you a lot of like mental resilience. Have you identified your purpose, and how do you help others around you? Or if you could help others around you, what would that help look like? Find their purpose.
Yeah, I would say that, much like what we talk about today around AI, for example, and, digital transformation, it implies that there's a beginning and there's an end, right?
Okay.
It's like, okay, I'll digitally transform my company and this will be done. I don't ever have to talk about this again, and I'll be way more profitable and I'll be way more successful once I do this one thing or these 10 things or these series of things. And I think purpose is much like that, right? There's not a beginning and there's not always going to be an end. And I think the commitment to finding purpose is really powerful and really important. And I think being able to also identify not just what your purpose is or what it is right now and how you want to, really lean into that purpose or learn what your purpose is. I think it's all part of a journey. But I think one thing I've learned personally, and I'll, tie it back to that, is that for so long, even though maybe I did know what my purpose was or I identified, elements of my purpose, I'd spent a lot of time looking at what other people were achieving and thinking that if they're, from that scarcity mindset, if they're achieving this, that means there's no more room for me to achieve that they're going to get all the clients and there's none left for me. And I'm not doing, like, their business is growing. And I think that there's that purpose alignment, that there really is room for all of us to thrive. And that when you start to give back to that mentality, you get it back. And I think that my purpose is underpinned by that philosophy, is that, giving back in a meaningful way is purpose. It's my purpose. I also think that one of my keys to success that I've learned along the way is being open to change, and embracing that. And, anything that can be disrupted will be disrupted. I really, truly believe that. And there's room for disruption, and it's exciting, but it's also terrifying. I'm in a service-based business that we continuously have to evolve and to grow. And if I'm so dead set on, how we do it and we do it better than anybody else, then we're missing opportunities. And so, my alignment to purpose around change is, I think, something I've had to really get comfortable with.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you like a little bit an off the script question, but let's bear with me, and you can tell me off if it's too off script. But I've just moved back. Like, I was a founder, built a company for 12 and a half years, and I've just moved back into finance. And I had a colleague over from one of the people who was on our board, and he was just laughing, and he goes, wait, now you're no longer gonna like bat for the founder. Now you have to bat for the other side, and everything you've ever said to us, Lena, is going to be turned on its head. And I love to watch you change. And I said, no, I'm not going to change. And I basically, and it's funny because I was on a panel the next day, and they were talking about what the founder's duty is. I don't know why we were talking about what the founder duty is to the board. And I got very upset, and I said, nobody has any duty to the board. People have the duty to create universal value for the employees so you can get more skill set, and then the whole ecosystem benefits. But you are right in the middle of that. On one side, you are doing VC, helping founders. On the other side, you're recruiting, and it's like a balance. And how do you balance that? Because and I mean, I've just started and it's a different mindset, but how do you balance that while also taking into account that you do want the best, or you want equilibrium for the employees?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think that balance is one that you learn, because I think it's really hard to know, like like you said, we're in the people business, right? So our path to success, or our keys to success, are not linear, right? It's not like we are going to be able to do the exact same 10 things, like reps and sets, to get the same result over and over and over again. In the world of people-driven businesses, and on either side of our equation of success, we have our clients, who are people, the people who we want them to hire or want them to consider to hire are people, and we are people, right? So I think that balance that you have to strike and to determine what works is always changing. It's sort of this fluid balance, but I think it's always underpinned by integrity. And when you have a business, you have a responsibility to ensure that you have really transparent service agreements in terms of how you service and how you support. And I think you have a responsibility and a duty to ensure that the people who are conducting and are in market on your behalf and on behalf of your clients are well trained, well supported, have the right resources to be making decisions and to act and operate on behalf of the organization and our clients, and to be really transparent. And I think that that's the key. So integrity and transparency are keys in our way of creating balance around that, because you have to realize that the person on the other end of your interaction or your expertise is a human, right? We don't know what we don't know. And I think that it's important to, speaking on behalf of my team, to make sure that they know that they're supported. As a leader, when things go right, when things are really successful, you have to be prepared to give up that recognition and share and support. And when things go wrong, you have to be prepared to take the accountability and responsibility of that as well. So when your team and your organization knows that they've, like I said before, have that safety net, I think it allows them to operate with transparency and integrity.
Okay, fabulous. I think the final question really, and it kind of draws on what you've said. You started speaking about transparency, and you ended with speaking about transparency. So it's clearly something you go by, and I think that's really wonderful. And you're such a great communicator. It just comes across really the integrity and the genuine intent there. It's wonderful. You spoke about your best friend. You spoke about losing her, and I'm very sorry about that. But where have you in your professional life experienced a mental health challenge at work? I think that I will end with that, and I think we'll have Nadine peeking in and telling us off. So we better wrap it up. Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I'll share is, those things are sort of, there's connective tissue, I think, around what I shared before around losing my best friend, and experiencing a mental health crisis at work. I think earlier on in my career, and not because of how anyone did things or didn't do things, we're all, I believe, inherently trying to do our best, right? So I've worked for great companies, I've worked for great leaders, I've worked in environments where maybe I worked too hard, or maybe they pressured me too much, I don't know. But I have experienced burnout before, to the point where I was at work one day and I thought I was having a heart attack, and instead of me worrying about the heart attack, I thought, what's more pressing here is that I'm going to miss a presentation. if I'm actually having a heart attack. It's so I've experienced that for myself where I'm so burnt out. I'm putting so much pressure on myself. So when it started to happen again in my own company, I was able to recognize what was happening and why potentially it was happening. And I didn't want it to happen again. I founded my company to be better than any company I had ever worked for. And that's a high bar to set, when you've worked for some pretty good companies. And so I didn't want that to happen to me or to anyone else ever. And so, my company and my leaders who worked for me and who still work for me and who are partners in my business today said, what can we do? And that's how we came up in 2020 with the 4-day work week. At first, the 4-day work week failed, and it failed hard. We thought it was going to solve all the problems or solve all the problems that we had and just be this magic, solution. And it wasn't, because we didn't know how to do it. And so it pressurized our environment and where our weaknesses were. And that was the learning was, okay, how am I communicating to my team? What expectations am I setting? And okay, now what am I going to do with this time that I have? And, what it ended up being in the beginning was me getting caught up on all my emails and responding to the team on Fridays. And that was setting a bad example, because here I am saying, don't work Fridays, but the founder of the company is working Fridays. So what's the message? And so what I did is, when I lost my best friend and I was in a mental health crisis, I had burnout on one end of it and then major loss and grief on the other end of it. And I said, that's enough. I need to do some work here. And so for almost an entire year, I gave back that time to myself and went to therapy and did the work. And, I can confidently say, that I'm grateful for everything that I've experienced. And, I think by being aware of it, the signs of it before, I was able to make change and show up in a different way.
Thank you for sharing, Jeremy. That's really wonderful. That's really wonderful. And I think we can continue, but we're completely,
okay.
He's gonna jump out of the screen. So we better give it over to her. Wonderful talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lina. Thank you, Jamie, for that. And what is a common mistake you see seasoned leaders make when it comes to the people and purpose side of their business?
Great question. I think that the common mistake I see and that I've seen in myself. So I think that, I'll underpin this response to what I've experienced personally as well, is that as leaders, as business owners, even though we're really clear on our purpose, at times, or maybe unclear at other times, is that we can't ignore the outside pressures, right? Like when you're working for a big, large corporation, your shareholder supremacy is undeniable, right? So you've got these external pressures, these, you've got a personal life, you've got your own challenges, right? So I think that when we start operating from a place of scarcity, of, trauma, and, not being able to remove that barrier and operate in that space at all times. Like Sophie said it so well yesterday, the saber-toothed tiger being in the room. And, I asked her the question around, well, how do you navigate when you feel like that saber-toothed tiger is in the room at all times? And she said something so powerful, and that is, work on and focus on the things that you can control and not the things that you can't. And so I see that often in myself and in other leaders, is focusing on the things that we cannot control.
Jamie, I just want to say a huge thank you. I'm really, really grateful for your presence with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
For the personal story, I think it really made a huge difference in today's talk. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lubna. Thanks, everyone.